Today we're going to do the weather stripping on the T-top, doors, and if we get time we're going to work on the hatch as well. Went over to Classic Industries, and as you can see I picked up, I'll turn the camera for you, OER. There's your part numbers and everything. This is original equipment reproduction, so it should actually match 100% to the design on the T-tops on the weather stripping as it is right now. So the first thing is we're going to take the glass off. Pretty straightforward. You just pull the handle and then everything lifts off. And the next stage will be actually removing the old weather stripping. So I'm going to go ahead and move this out of the way for them. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is, you can see there's a screw right here. This is just for the internal plastic cover, and same on the other side. There's a screw right there. We're going to go ahead and pull those screws out and remove these plastic trim pieces, and underneath this there's also a nut, I believe it's a 7mm that's under here, that we're going to have to remove and lower the headliner so we can get full access to everything that you're seeing right here. On this top end you can see there's a metal plate. That plate also just needs to be removed. And then the next stage after that is we will take a heat gun, start heating up all the weather strip, and you can see the condition of this weather strip falling apart here. So once we heat all that up, we'll be able to peel it back and get the internal channels all cleaned up, and then we can do the glue down and install the new strip. So the reason we're going to use a heat gun is the factory does install glue on these, so the heat gun will help break that up. You saw me earlier wearing a set of gloves. Those are heat resistant gloves, so I'll be wearing those to help just grab a hold of this and pull everything up without burning myself with the heat gun accident. Okay, so I went ahead and pulled out the panels, and I loosened on the rear this lower panel so I can pull back the headliner to get access right in here. And you can see that is where the 7mm bolt went, so I went ahead and removed that. On the front it was a lot easier to access, so I didn't have to pull out anything other than that one trim panel piece. Now that this is loose, this is just part of the bracket on here, I can start going through and removing. Alright, as you can see, put a couple shop towels down trying to protect the interior. I'm going to start removing this, and one of the things to note is down in here there are some clips, so it might be a little bit difficult pulling the bottom end. So I'm going to first try to pry it up a little bit. This clip tool, there's one, and there's two. So you can see right there, these are the clips I'm talking about. So if you have a tool like this, I highly recommend using it. Let's see first. Actually, so you can see there's the glue down on the inside here. And this is why we want to have two things: scraper tool and a heat gun. It's hard to see, but you can actually see the glue slowly melting on the inside here. Keep in mind these heat guns get about 1100 degrees in temperature on a high setting like I have it right now. So even with the tough gloves that I'm wearing, I can actually still feel the heat coming through it. So be very cautious as to not to burn yourself while doing this. And there's no need to rush it. Just kind of take it step by step. Like even right there, I just burned my headliner. My fault, definitely got to be a little cautious. Luckily in the future here, I'm actually going to be replacing my headliner when I do the rest of the interior. But I would absolutely advise trying to avoid that if you can. Now, headliners don't take much to burn, and I just got a little too close and looks like I tagged it. Trying to just soften up the glue so when the scraper goes underneath it, it can hopefully just push it up instead of ripping all this out. Mind you, I'm trying to get as much of it as possible out in one larger piece, because the more you break it up, the more work you're going to have, because you're not able to pull it apart easily. Definitely some of this that does not want to come up. Now this one doesn't look like anyone tried to add any glue underneath this, but someone in the past may have had a leak or anything on the car. They may have tried to put a little silicone down under there. Will definitely make this thing a whole lot harder, but I don't see that on this one in particular. Almost treating this like a hot knife. So I want to point some out of here. You can see it's actually really, really clean. And right in this corner, a little bit of rust right there. So that's where the weather stripping was leaking, because everything else is really well sealed. So before I go to put this back in, I'm going to clean this entire channel out. I'm going to pull all this old glue that you're seeing in here. I'm going to kind of clean all that off of here, and I'm going to take some rubbing alcohol and wipe it all down, so when I go to put everything down in here, none of that will be there. I'm also probably going to sand that down with a little bit of sandpaper and put a coating on there, maybe just a little touch-up paint to seal it back up after I get the rust out of there. Okay, you can see I now got the entire piece out. I was incorrect. This piece actually does not need to be removed, but it looks like in order to remove it, you remove the weather stripping on both sides. We take these 3 screws out. There's a small screw here, small screw over here as well, and same on the other side, and it looks like it just lifts right out. I'm probably going to do that because I want to repaint this piece anyways, so I'm going to add that to what I'm doing right now. For today, just seeing how much time this one piece has taken me, I'm probably going to end up just getting just the T-top and the doors done today and not work on the hatch. A definite word of caution when you're using the heat gun, It's really, really easy to start melting the headliner. I've done it, as you can see, like twice now here, and I would advise with the scraper tool, try to get the scraper underneath the weather stripping and run it down as far as you can a couple times, and then use the heat gun on the top sides of the weather stripping when you're dealing with close edges where the headliner is. Like I said, for me, it's not too much of a big deal. I mean, I'm not thrilled that I did that because my interior, my headliner was in great condition, but I do plan on changing the interior to the Knight Rider interior, so it's going to have the beige carpets, the toast color PMD seats, and the headliner and all that's also going to be done to match. So not hugely concerned on this end of it, but if it was the proper headliner that was already supposed to be in here, I probably would have pulled the entire headliner down before starting this. Okay, so I got everything off of it here. You can see, looks actually really good for the most part. Do see some rust under here and under here. That's basically where the water was leaking through. Everything else looks okay. So I'm going to take some time, I'm going to sand these down, I'm going to primer them with some rust inhibitor and then repaint them, as well as on the other portion here. This is the T-top center divider rail. Looks actually in really good condition, but you do see where it's got the rust from the bottom side here, so I'm going to do the same thing to here. I'm going to sand this down, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to primer it and paint it. Update is to a progress. So here's the center support bar for the T-tops. I've done the first coat of paint. I am using the factory black, so it's supposed to match the original color. Looks pretty good. Everything's already primered. Now I've got the first coat of paint. Gonna let it set up, then I'm gonna shoot it probably one, maybe two more times on. Okay, so got the center rail painted, and I just put it down, and you can see put a small layer of RTV black silicone down just underneath it on the edges. Figured just in case a little water gets down in there, at least that has a little bit of a blockage. Underneath, what I thought was rust on the actual frame wasn't. Those are like some type of a mesh pad of some sort. They were probably like an insulating foam when factory first installed it. So I decided to just throw a little RTV black down in there to act as that insulation foam. Now, the other thing I did was I went in and I pulled this side rail off, and see, it's actually pretty bright that way, but you can see this rail right here. The foam insulator goes on the inside of here. I went ahead and I pulled it off and I repainted it as well. Did the same thing, put a little bit of RTV black behind here, just so that that's weather insulated, so if water starts coming down on this rail and gets behind here, it's going to fall out on the outside instead of going down and seeping through on the inside of the vehicle. So next stage is, now that I've cleaned all these out, I've actually wiped them all down, scraped them all down. Next thing is I'm going to start putting in the weather stripping. The two things I'm going to do on the inside here, I'm going to throw down a little weather strip adhesive, and on the outer edges I'm going to throw some RTV black, just so it gives me a little bit more on each one of the corner spots of coverage, so if for some reason the mold doesn't hold perfectly, the RTV should be able to kind of give me that little bit of extra security on this whole thing. Okay, first thing before putting anything in, you want to test fit it, just kind of laying it across and just seeing how the edges are. The good thing is this one actually comes with 3N tape already set up. It's a molding tape, so it has a little foam backing, so that when it goes into that corner back there, it's going to be weather sealed completely and already able to mount it. Classic Industries also gives you the new screws and pins, so for these edges right here, when it goes into these little holes right there, it's going to actually just snap in place with the pins. So it looks like it's going to be a good fit. I'm going to put a little weather strip glue down here. May not even use the RTV. I'm going to kind of play it by ear right now, and I'll let you know. Okay, so I now have one set in. As you can see, looks clean, very nice all the way through. It's actually pretty simple to install. As you can see down here, these were the new clips that I was mentioning it actually comes with, and in this back corner with that 3M tape, it has a nice mount to it all the way through. It definitely took some time, but installing it wasn't so bad. What you have to do is start from the outside edge inwards, so you kind of dip it underneath, put the lip underneath it all the way through. I started in these back corners, so I started here, worked all the way to here, and then worked outwards and around, and then came back around, did the same thing over here. And then what I did after is you'll need a couple tools, something like this and something like that one right there, just flat end tools. I'm using rubber or plastic so that the rubber doesn't get pierced. In this back corner, as you can see, there's not a lot of room to work here. So to get even this outer edge in, I had to kind of get this one underneath in here and push it down. And then for the inner edge, you just take the wider tool and start it up on top, and I worked my way all the way down. But again, you always want to start here and work downwards. So once I got everything on the outer edge, I then came back and I was able to just use my hands and roll it back in place all the way through here. And then only for this side did I need those tools at all. So next side, I'm going to actually show you how I put the glue down. Okay. So what I'm doing is just putting a small bead, starting in the corners. The corner I go really thick, really heavy, and then just a light bead. The point of the weather strip glue is not really to act as a sealer, but to keep this in place and just kind of lock it down so it doesn't shift over time. Now keep in mind, it's really tacky. You can see I'm just using Permatex, the black super weather strip adhesive. And as I said before, we're going to start in the corners, going outside edge in first. And then just drop it in place. And you can see how easily that went in. Again, corners go a little heavy. Inside edge. And as you can see, it drops in really simply. that 7mm nut, or excuse me, bolt. So we definitely have to tighten that back in place here. Keeping the headliner on, be careful not to overextend the headliner as it will break on this corner edge. An open and box end wrench would probably be best for this corner. Fortunately, in my case, I couldn't find my open and box end, so I just simply used what I had available to me, which was the small 7mm socket and wrench. Since I removed the screws on the inside here to gain access, I'm putting all that back together right now. Now that that's back in, I'd kind of snap these two in place earlier. I'm going to lock them all the way in. That's it, the side's done. Before I put this trim panel piece back on, I'm actually going to do the other side. Same process over here, just throw some glue down. Remember, a difference on this end for me is the last time I was forced to use a tool to get this all the way in here. Looks like I'm going to have to do the same thing again. Take the tape off. Let's get that outside edge in. Corner in place. This corner was hard for me last time, so I'm going to grab that tool. I talked about this thin one before, so that's where I was able to use it last time and just use that edge. Get that inside corner in there, and just make sure the outside edge is in. And then go to your inside edge. The tool, all you're doing is just snapping it down underneath. You want to be forceful but gentle so you don't tear it. So on one hand, I'm using my thumb to kind of put a little pressure while the tool is forcing it under that lip. that's in place, make sure it's all seated. And again, got that same 7mm setup on this corner. Usually try to run this down by hand first. And that's it. Everything's in place. Take a closer look. See, that corner is now locked in. It's nice and smooth. And what I was talking about over here, you can see how it's all locked in place. Sorry about the sun flares. Everything is seated nicely. Look how close that is. How tight. Next thing, I will assemble the T-top. One thing I forgot to mention, there are 2 screws up on top here, one right here. The aftermarket, you're going to end up removing these and not using them again. So I'll go ahead and pull those off. Now that's what's going to release the actual weather stripping. So what I had to do last time is kind of break it free on both sides. And then I just took the screwdriver and ran it forward and was able to pull it through. Once you get it to come out one side, that's it. The rest just pops out. Now again, 4 screws I was talking about. That's the 4. That's the factory rail. And you can see it starts to warp with age and leaks. So take a little rag and go through and you can scrape off any of this excess rubber on here. It actually looks pretty good right now. So I'm going to do a little cleanup with just a screwdriver. This is just like a little rubber grab a scraper tool here. Rubber's really pliable, so it doesn't take a lot of force or any chemicals or anything to pull this stuff off. You won't even need a heat gun on this. It's literally just a little bit of elbow grease here, and you can see it's coming right up. Now that I've got that out, wipe it down, clean it up, and you can see this is the new bottom piece. Comes with 3N mounting tape. And this rail actually is a little bit different than the other side. So I'm going to have to cut these off. The other side actually did pop in place. They had hole mounts already in these pieces that I was able to just snap this in place. It doesn't take much. I just need to get a pair of dikes and just cut those two bottom pieces off. Okay, so you can see this piece right here. Now I went ahead and just cut those little snap pieces on the bottom end. I just snapped them off with a pair of dikes, lining up the 4 holes down here. Then got the second rail piece here. It's got a nice foam mount. You can see it has an arc to it, so you take that arc side and make sure it just lines up. You know, if you try to put it in the wrong way, you can definitely see the arch is not in the proper way, so you want it arced correctly. So take that, line it up. Now the next stage is just take those 4 bolts, put those back in place. Now I always put the 4 in place first so I can line up as needed in case something shifts or moves. So what I'm seeing on this end right now. So I got that in place, start in the middle, torque it down just till the foam secures. That's it. It's now flushly mounted in place. Everything sits flush. And then the next stage would just simply be taking the foam, the rubber rail, and putting that in place as well. Okay, so the last piece is this rubber piece, and it's just going to go on the inside of this rail. So we're going to kind of do the same thing that we did before, and you can see that there's just a lip on each side of it. So just kind of gauge where you're at with it so you don't have to slide it around too much afterwards. And start with one edge, just get that down in there. And then for the second piece, the same thing. Start, get one edge into it. So I'm doing the outside edge first, and now going back to the inside. And using the same tool I used earlier, starting from one end and just walking my way all the way down to the other. You can actually see it pop in place, and you can hear it snap in place at the same time. Not using any type of weather stripping glue or anything on that nature. Now you can see I've got a little bit more on this side than on this side, so you can try to slide it, but you're going to have to do it in pieces and to get it a little bit level. and just double check and just make sure that everything is in place. I'm satisfied with that. This is now just going to go back in place. Make sure when you put this back in place that you do put it back the same way you removed it. Otherwise, you're going to be fighting trying to figure out what angle it's supposed to be in. Again, it's just a T20. Doesn't take too much pressure to be in there. Let's get these 3 screws back in here. Looks like I dropped the other 2 screws, so I'm going to go ahead and grab those. They fell just down on the bottom over here. I'm going to put the other 2 back in, and that's it. It's going to be set, and I'll show you the completed version in just a moment. Okay, we're all set. We're all done. See that nice, very tight weather seal all the way around now. Also keep in mind, because it's fresh, it's going to take a couple days for this to seat properly. You'll probably have to slam your doors a little bit harder than normal until everything kind of seats in and, you know, adjusts for it being new. But overall, this project's taken me all day. It is definitely something you want to really set some time apart to do. My next video, I'm going to show you how to do the rear hatch weather stripping. That one I don't anticipate taking a whole lot of time. That one's pretty straightforward. You remove the strip and lay down the new one.